Welcome to another mailbag session. Remember, these are questions and comments you guys leave on the channel. But before we get going on this session, remember, normal parish notices apply. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, why not? Hit the subscribe icon. If you want to be notified when new content hits the channel, it's the bell icon's the one you need. If you like the contents of this video, give it a thumbs up. Consider becoming a member of the TMTG community. It's always a big mouthful. The address is down the bottom, as are the Facebook and Instagram tags. Go tag me over there. But now back to the video. The next one comes from Bobcat22. And he or she writes, in response to the Roland A-880, I always have to think about that video I did, which was what's inside the box. So basically I opened the box up and showed you the contents, which I always do. I actually always do that. And people always say, why'd you do it? I mean, it's always to inspect the circuitry and see if there's any black spots on the circuitry and that sort of stuff. And I also take a lot of high definition photographs of the inside of the box as well, so that if I do need to change something, I do need to do something down the line. I kind of know what it looks like inside. So hopefully that sort of makes a lot of sense. Anyway, that wasn't the question. Why does a MIDI router merger need a battery? And there is actually a simple answer to it. And the simple answer is it holds patches. And if you don't have any power on the volatile memory, which was sort of kind of what was around at the time, it loses all those patches. So that's the simple answer. I'll go into a little bit more detail. So if you look at the front panel of the A880 and you go onto the internet and look at things, or you go onto my channel and look at the inside the box thing, I prefer you go to the inside the box thing personally, but hey ho. You'll see a couple of buttons. One says memory, and one says write. And if you look at those, that's how you effectively write to the A880. So you can effectively, in the A880, you can effectively route route MIDI from your input sources to your output sources. And you can also route MIDI channels from the input sources to the output sources. So if you have a studio set up, and remember the A880 was kind of pre-interfaces, okay? So it was designed to be standalone. You could put it in your touring rig, or a lot of studios used it, if I'm brutally honest. And based on that, you could set up routing. So you could say, I want my master keyboard on input 1 to drive my slave modules on outputs 4, 5, and 6. Okay, for one song. And then for the next song, you can say, I want my master keyboard on input 2 to drive my master keyboard in input 1 and modules on 7 and 8, and my master keyboard on number 1 to drive modules on 2 and 3. Okay, so that's how you could set it up. And if you were then able to program your MIDI setup, so you would basically have a foot switch on something like a Roland A-880, you could send MIDI change signals to the entire MIDI setup, and you could effectively set your entire playlist up on this platform, and it would theoretically change all the MIDI setup for you, all the patches and all the routing. That's the reason why it has a battery. And obviously the more you use it, the less the battery gets drained. The less you use it, the more the battery gets drained. Simple as that, because it needs power over the volatile memory chips. Now the A880 comes with 64, so there's 8 banks of 8 patches, which is 64 patches in total. A simple bit of maths there. So you can actually set up 64 different routing combinations on your A880 that have no requirement to have a computer involved. Okay, I use it a lot I used it a lot in the studio when the studio was up for doing non-computer work. So I used to sort of say, I want to play this, I want this to play that, and I would just set it up in the A80 as a simple set of routing parameters, and I could make my MIDI route around the studio very, very quickly, rather than having to get a door out. Sorry, not door. Get the computer out, plug the computer in, which I didn't always have the computer plugged in when I just sometimes sat down to play. I mean, if I'm honest, I don't have the computer plugged in here. The computer is actually over there, but it's not actually plugged into this at the moment. So I do that a lot. I don't sit down with the computer. So that's kind of how I use it and how I've used it. Now, back in the day when this thing came out, there were editing programs for the Atari ST, the Commodore Amiga, early Mac type stuff, but those don't work anymore. So well, I suppose if you've got a Commodore ST and an Amiga, which I don't have, they probably would still work, but I don't have those platforms anymore. I have been considering getting one of them again, but I haven't got any of those. But effectively, they were programs that will allow you to actually use the graphical user interface of the computer to set the routing up on the A80 and effectively dump it down. Now, there is a utility from someone called Mountain Utilities that does allow you to do this on a modern computer and send it down to the A80. But I'll be brutally honest with you, I haven't got round to loading it up due to everything else that's going on at the moment. So that's probably something of a future video when I get round to loading that piece of software up. Now, the tuber then wrote back to me and said, I have a MIDI Solutions M8 and looking for 8 out. This is how I found your video. I do not know the advantage of Roland A-880 over the MIDI Solutions. However, the MIDI Solutions does not need power supply nor USB to power it. It has to be powered somehow. That's my first comment on this second piece. So it's either got a battery in it or it's taking power off the MIDI/USB bus. I am always incredibly cautious about taking power off the MIDI or USB bus because, and I did a video on this called Powergonomics, which is where I went through and I basically added up the power requirements of everything you were attaching to your computer. And these computers only can push out a maximum of 2000 milliamps or 2 amps, which is typically what a USB bus will push out. And a lot of this equipment is quite hungry. You don't really believe it's quite hungry, but it's when you sort of start thinking about, if it says it uses 20 watts of power and you're supplying it power on a USB bus, which is 5 volts, to get power, it's volts times amps. So you need you'll be using 4 milliamps, 4,000 milliamps to get 20 watts of power. So it doesn't take a genius to all of a sudden start working out. You're going to start running into power problems at that point. Sorry, I'm just trying to think through the maths in my head. So that'd be the first thing I would say about it. The Roland A-880 is a router. I've explained why it's a router. It's not a merge unit. Now, a merge unit works slightly differently. What a merge unit will do is it will take the information coming in on inputs 1 and inputs 2, and it will combine that information together, and it will then send it out through all the outputs. Okay, you don't get to choose which outputs it goes out through. It's kind of, here's everything, and it sends it out. So if you have 2 keyboards or 2 master keyboards that are transmitted on channel 1, they will be combined together, and what is sent out on channel 1 through the outputs is effectively the combination of those 2 keyboards input. So basically the M8 I think is a merge unit, not a router, and that's the difference between the two. Personally, I would look at routing solutions rather than merging solutions, but there are instances where merging solutions potentially are the better idea, and I can think about a couple around programmers, e.g. the PG1000 for the D50.